Good afternoon and welcome to the Assembly Committee on Natural Resources. Will the committee secretary please call the roll?
Assembly members Considine. Present. DeLong.
Present.
Gurr.
Here.
Hanson.
Here.
Jackson.
Here.
Karras.
Here.
Kasama.
Here.
LaRue Hatch.
Here.
Marzola. Watts.
Here.
Chair Anderson.
And I am present. If you would please mark Assembly Member Marzola present when she arrives. So thank you, Secretary. I want to welcome everyone to this meeting today, those here in Carson City, as well as anyone joining us in Las Vegas and or listening on Elko. Oh, we don't know, or listening online. I know that there's been some issues with Zoom, so that could be having one impact with it. On today's agenda, it's a little bit packed. We have some BDR introductions, a work session, and one bill hearing. So we will, but first some housekeeping announcements, Please remember to silence all electronic devices while in the committee room. Committee members will be using their laptops to view handouts and exhibits. Please do not view this as a sign of disrespect or inattention. We do expect courtesy and respect in our interactions during the meeting, even if we may not agree with another person's position. All exhibits, amendments, and/or other materials must be submitted electronically to our committee manager by no later than 12 p.m. on the business day before the meeting. And also just a quick reminder, if you're coming in person, you can always sign in up to a half hour before the meeting starts. You don't have to do it like 2 minutes before the meeting starts. Not that I've heard that from our incredibly awesome committee staff, but just a reminder. And then when testifying in person, please turn on the microphone and clearly state and spell your name. Please also state for the record any organization or agency you are representing. Public comment will be taken at the end of the meeting. And finally, please note that agenda items may be taken in a different order than those listed. 2 or more agenda items may be combined for consideration. And also an item may be removed. And from the agenda or discussion of an item on the agenda may be delayed at any time. We're actually going to start off first with committee BDRs. We have 3 of them. The first is BDR 48-386, and this is a BDR that revises provisions relating to water. Just a reminder, I know, aren't you all surprised there's another one related to water? I think we all are in this committee, right? Just a reminder that when accepting or voting for a BDR introduction, that does not mean you support it. It's simply to be able to move it along in the process. So with that, are there any questions? I will take a motion to accept BDR 48-386.
So moved.
Second.
Wow, okay. We've got a lot of people wanting to discuss water today. So it appears that we've got a motion made by the Vice Chair LaRue Hatch, seconded by Assembly Member Watts. Our next one, BDR, is BDR 50-1096. This is revised provisions related to the sale of certain pets. As is true from the last one, just by simply voting for the BDR does not mean you are supporting the bill. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, is there a motion to accept BDR 50-1096?
Second.
Great. Motion made by Assemblymember Gurr, seconded by Watts. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Did I remember to accept the last BDR, by the way, from the committee?
We did not do the vote.
We did not do the vote, so if we may go back to BDR, for BDR 5096, I heard no opposition, so we will be accepting 5096 as a BDR. And then for BDR 48-386, we had the motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Hearing none, motion's been adopted. And our final is BDR 35-678. This makes various changes related to wildlife. In particular, it has to do with the wildlife crossings account. Are there any questions? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion at this time.
So moved.
Second.
Wow, everybody wants to go. And so we've got a motion by Assemblymember Watts, seconded by Considine. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Hearing none, motion's been adopted. Thank you so much for your patience with that. At this point, we'll move on to, since we're still missing an individual, let's move on to our bill presentation. For those of you that are presenting for Assembly Bill AB 363, if you would like to come on up to start your presentation. Thank you so much, Mr. Fontaine. I'll open the hearing on Assembly Bill 363, which revises provisions related to groundwater boards. Thank you again, Mr. Fontaine, for joining us today. And when you are ready, you're more than welcome to introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, Vice Chair LaRue Hatch, and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Jeff Fontaine, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Central Nevada Regional Water Authority. CNRWA was established 20 years ago to prepare communities in Central and Eastern Nevada for sound water resource decisions that promote prosperous economies and strong civic institutions in a healthy natural environment. Today, CNRWA has 10 member counties. Thank you for the opportunity to present AB 363, and also I want to express our appreciation to Assembly Members Anderson, LaRue Hatch, DeLong, and Gurr for supporting this proposed legislation as members of the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Natural Resources. So, AB 363 amends NRS 534-035, which in 1961 established the Las Vegas Valley Groundwater Board to advise and make recommendations to the state engineer on how that basin in Las Vegas should be managed. No other county groundwater board has been established because really the statute is outdated and not workable in other groundwater basins in the state. In 2023, the Nevada Division of Water Resources produced a Basin Status Assessment Map series, really great work, and it shows where potential groundwater problems exist or where they're at risk. And according to the map, 65 groundwater basins in the state are overpumped and many more are overappropriated. And the groundwater condition in these basins is really concerning, and I would say has created uncertainty about the future prosperity in areas that rely on these basins for their groundwater. Looking ahead, Nevada faces, I guess, what you would maybe call a triple threat: continued population growth demanding more water, increased urbanization, and recurring drought and other climate impacts. There are no easy fixes, and there are just limited tools available to the state engineer to address these concerns. Curtailment of pumping in a basin, which is the most drastic remedy, would be devastating. So we want to avoid this scenario. The assessment map series also notes that for a comprehensive understanding of the groundwater problems in these specific areas or related to a particular water right, and to determine appropriate actions to address these issues, further investigation beyond the scope of these indicator maps is required. And we agree with that. However, the Nevada Division of Water Resources, I don't believe, has the funding or staff to perform all of these activities in all of these basins that need to be managed. And in addition to performing the administrative and management duties, there's a vital need for the division to modernize Nevada's water management infrastructure, update the baseline science, and the data that's really the basis for managing the state's groundwater basins. The deterioration of groundwater basins usually occur over decades, and its restoration is a prolonged undertaking. We believe that a community-based approach to developing locally driven solutions in coordination with the Division of Water Resources is a viable approach to solving local water resource issues. We know that State Engineer Sullivan and the Division of Water Resources believe it's important to engage stakeholders, and we really appreciate their efforts to do so. However, it's unrealistic to expect that the division can sustain their efforts and have the capacity to address the unique needs of water users and communities in each of these basins, and we believe that a consistent and formalized process that recognizes community engagement is needed. Meaningful change comes from working and supporting local community-based organizations in ways that align with their needs. And the impact really happens through small, consistent efforts by those who are most impacted. A number of other states have formed formal local groundwater boards with varying degrees of authority and responsibility. In AB 363, we're really looking at establishing a groundwater board with much less complex responsibilities and structure and scope than in any other state that we could find. In summary, AB 363 authorizes a county to establish a groundwater board that is advisory only and whose experience and knowledge can help prevent over-appropriated basins from becoming overpumped and overpumped groundwater basins from being depleted or curtailed. I'd like to go, with your permission, Chair Anderson, to the bill and walk through the various sections. So Section 1, subsection, Sections A and B enable the Board of County Commissioners, or in the case of a designated groundwater basin that lies in more than one basin, boards of county commissioners to jointly create a board by making a request to the state engineer, who then would appoint 7 members based on the priority and the quantity of the water rights they hold in the basin as described in subsections A through C. Subsection 4 provides that in addition to the members appointed by the state engineer, the board or boards of county commissioners may appoint a non-voting member to the groundwater board. Section 5 sets the term of the members at 4 years. Section 6 makes clear that the groundwater board meetings are public meetings subject to Nevada's open meeting law. Subsection 7 and 8 require a majority of board members to constitute a quorum and state that members of the board serve without compensation. Section 9 substantially reduces the duties of the groundwater board, and the current requirements in law to create a groundwater board really create those barriers to actually want to join or request a groundwater board and to actually manage one. And it removes a lot of the, again, the existing requirements, and instead just requires the state engineer to consider written advice and recommendations of the groundwater board to reduce overpumping in the basin. Subsection 9 also removes the requirement of the state engineer to provide a written report on a disagreement with a recommendation of the board. And again, this groundwater board is advisory only. There are no other requirements or expectations of the state engineer. Finally, subsection 9 adds language that a decision of the state engineer to not comply with a recommendation of the board is not subject to judicial review, and also that a disagreement between the state engineer and groundwater board is not admissible in any proceeding challenging a decision of the state engineer. Subsection 10 sunsets a groundwater board after 4 years unless the Board of County Commissioners requests and the state engineer approves an additional 4-year term, and that the board can be dissolved by a majority of its voters. And finally, Section 2 removes state funding for the groundwater board. Finally, Chair Anderson, with your permission, I'd like to add or to put on record both the Humboldt River Basin Water Authority and Nevada Farm Bureau's support for AB 363. Mr. Busselman, who is the Executive Vice President of the Nevada Farm Bureau, is not able to attend this hearing, and he asked me to convey that support for this bill. With that, Chair Anderson and members, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, and I do believe we have a few. Looking around, I've got more than one, it looks like. Great. We will start off with Assemblymember DeLong.
Thank you, Chair. I actually will end up having 2 questions, whether I can do them both or you want to do them
Feel
differently.
free to ask both questions.
Okay. I think the first question I have has to do with who actually can establish the groundwater boards, and the way I read it right now, it just says the state engineer can do it. Is there any way that the county commissioners can actually establish the board? Is that possible?
Chair Anderson, would you like me to go through you or directly?
Please go directly.
Assemblymember Long, so in AB 363, it would be requested by a Board of County Commissioners, and then the members would be appointed by the state engineer. And if I understand your question, you're asking, could the Board of County Commissioners also appoint the members? I think the answer to that is yes, or at the very least, recommend appointments to the state engineer. The criteria or the conditions, I should say criteria, I guess, for being a member or being considered a member of a groundwater board is based on your seniority of your water right and the amount of water that you have. And so that's public record. I mean, you can go to the Division of Water Resources website and find who those people are, and then you can make that recommendation by the county commissioners, or maybe the county commissioners could just appoint those individuals on their own.
Thank you. Okay, and my second question has to do with section 1, subsection 3 on the page, what's page number 2, line 32. It basically says they have, to be on the board, you have to reside within the designated groundwater basin. And what do we mean by that? Because you've got, does that mean their house is there, their mailing address is there? Or is it just they have a water right there? You know, they might live in the next basin over, have a couple of farms. So they might even live in a different state, but still have a significant groundwater right in that basin. So is resident the correct word?
Assemblymember DeLong, I think the intent originally was to have it be a resident, full-time or otherwise, in that basin, but certainly, I think we'd all be open to the idea of not limiting it to just a resident, because there are, as you indicated, individuals and even corporations that own lots of water rights in these basins, and they should be part of this process as well.
Assemblymember Hanson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here. By way of a little history, when I was first elected in served in 2019, my district, the 6 counties, and then it was 7 counties, there were so many water issues, and I felt completely overwhelmed. And I have to admit that where I received so much of my education was from Central Nevada Regional Water Authority, Humboldt River Basin Authority, I always say that wrong. And now Central Nevada Regional Water Authority has grown to 10 counties, when I think back in my day it was at about 8. So I just want to say thank you. I have found that to be an incredible source, because a lot of it was coming from those counties along the Humboldt and I had the bottom of every basin, it seemed like, in the state. So my question is, how many county groundwater boards do you think would be requested, if this bill were to pass, would be requested by counties?
Thank you for the question, Assemblymember Hanson. I don't think we're going to have a lot of requests. And I, quite frankly, would be surprised if we had 5 requests. And there are a lot of reasons for that, whether or not counties would actually be interested in doing this, whether they feel there's a need to do it. And I think people would want some time to figure out how this all might work. So, but I can't guarantee anything, and you know, I mean, I guess there's always the possibility of, you know, suggesting some cap on the number of groundwater boards that could be created, for example. But again, I just don't anticipate a large number of requests.
What was the question? Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Appreciate that. And so, are there any specific water basins where this governance would be helpful now that you could think of?
Thank you for the question again, Assemblymember Hanson. I mean, there are 65 overpumped groundwater basins and many, many over-appropriated basins, and it's hard to say, but there are lots of groundwater basins where we're seeing not only overpumping, but also rapidly or sharply declining groundwater levels, and so there are already impacts associated with that. You know, people are having to deepen their wells at great expense, just lots of issues. So it's possible in some of those basins that we could really focus on, you know, seeing if there's interest. In the Humboldt Basin that you represent, Humboldt region, there are basins, a few basins that I can think of, where long-term groundwater pumping has resulted in diminished flows in the Humboldt River, and so it's capturing surface water, and there's lots of work underway, including a stakeholder working group to discuss ideas or concepts on how to manage all of that, and so that might be a really good, you know, possibility as well in some of those basins.
Thank you, Chair, and just thank you, Mr. Fontaine. Just for the record, to really reiterate how helpful it has been for me to get information from those that are really familiar with these issues in the county, because I can't be everywhere. And so I know the state engineer has a lot of work ahead of him and his office, but in my opinion, these boards would be extremely helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Any other? Okay. Vice Chair LaRue Hatch.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for bringing this critical issue. I echo the sentiments of my colleagues. My question is specifically on page 4, when we are looking at subsection 9. I just wanted to clarify the process. So this board will create a written document with recommendations, and that will be sent to the state engineer to consider. But to be clear, that is not then admissible in court and cannot be used against them, whether the state engineer agrees or disagrees with the recommendations. Is that correct?
Thank you, Vice Chair Hatch. That is correct, and for those of you who were on natural resources
Just a
last.
reminder to please state your name.
I'm sorry, for the record,
Thank
Jeff
you.
Fontaine. My apologies. For those of you who were on natural resources last session, this bill is sure familiar to you, and that was an issue that came up. I know it was a concern from the Division of Water Resources, and I don't remember in which committee LCB legal counsel opined that this was language that would in fact do what we're trying to do here.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? All right. Thank you for the presentation, and I know that some of us have heard this before, so it's good to hear it again. I'm wondering if I'm going to take a little bit of a departure before starting testimony. I didn't know if the water engineer would like to come up to make any comments as well, or if there's any other questions. It's up to you. Completely up to you if you'd like to make any statements at this time regarding it, since this does directly impact you as well. It's up to you. Come on up. Come on down. So if you'd just like to make any sort of statements or comments, because it's sometimes difficult to do that on support or against or neutral at times. So if there's any things that you've heard that you'd like to also reply to.
Well, thank you, Chair Anderson. Adam Sullivan for the record. I intend to make comments really in neutral testimony, and it's really my observations and considerations with this bill, and I can wait till neutral testimony to do that.
Why don't you do that now, so then that way you're not held to that 2 minutes. But if you go over 4 minutes, stop it. But if you'd like to spend a little bit more time, that'd be great.
Okay, I will. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So my neutral testimony, I'm trying to provide just my perspective on this proposal and some considerations, which I'm really encouraged to hear that some of the things that jumped out at me are also reflected in the questions that were asked by members of the committee. But it generally has to do with what the expectations would be of both of the board members and of the Division of Water Resources if this were adopted, and then some of the questions about the process of establishing the board. So the first point I had was, I think, exactly what Assembly Member DeLong was asking, wherein it's a little bit unclear to me if establishing the board is meant to be a cooperative process or if it's meant to be directed by the county, because in subsection 1A, it makes it sound like this is a suggestion from the county, and then the state engineer could consider it and opt to do it or not. But then in subsection 3, it makes it sound like it's a directive from the county. Like if a request is submitted, that the state engineer shall establish this board. So I think that needs to be answered. The second item gets to Assemblymember Hanson's question about the number of boards, and like Mr. Fontaine said, or it was already discussed, there's a lot of designated basins in the state. About well over 100 designated basins. So there's a question of how many boards would be established, and would we have the resources to be responsive and kind of follow through on our end of what's expected. The third point is with regard to representation of who's on the board compared to who the water right holders are in the basin. It is pretty common for water right holders to not live in the basin, especially with the large farms or industries, mines. They're not local residents. That needs to be acknowledged. Another thing is that a lot of the most acute problems in groundwater basins are where there's a river or it's surface water dominated. And like was discussed before by Mr. Fontaine, that you have groundwater pumping that's impacting those relatively senior surface water rights. And those right holders wouldn't be represented in the groundwater board, which again, I just think needs to be considered. A third point for your awareness is that establishing boards is not something that we, as a division, we have done before. There isn't precedent for that. It's not a typical process for us as a regulatory agency to establish boards. So that would be a new thing. The next point is about the expectations of the board and the duties. So again, there's very limited authority for the state engineer's office to require a reduction in pumping. And that is really either curtailing by priority where there's identified a conflict, or establishing a critical management area, which establishes this process for reducing pumping. There's a lot of other things that can happen at the local level on a voluntary basis for people who are actually using water to reduce, to cut back their pumping, to protect the resource for the common good. And we can be supportive of that. And there's a number of examples around the state where we do that just by sharing the data, by assuring people that we're not going to forfeit water rights if they're using less to conserve, and by sort of trying to help project out how much of a reduction would actually be needed to prevent a curtailment situation or conflict. So those are things that are in place, and that's good. That's where we can talk about practical solutions that are outside of the lane of strict water law. That's a really good process. So Mr. Fontaine mentioned that one of the intents of the Groundwater Board is to prevent over-appropriated basins from becoming over-pumped basins. And that really captures my attention, because here, that's where we're talking about all these water rights that are in good standing but aren't in use. And I think one of the risks is that generally represents people that aren't part of the boards or the active local community that's thinking about how to conserve resources. And my feeling around that is we need to at least simultaneously address that issue, because we don't have a very good, well-defined process for addressing the bulk of unused water rights. And how can we ask people who are using water, who are trying to find ways to conserve, to support that when we know that there's all these unused water rights that could come in and start pumping and undermine the efforts that are going on by the active users. That's a risk that I see that I think needs to be at least simultaneously addressed, because I think groundwater boards, rightfully so, would go right there as the first question about long-term viability of the resource. So those are really my thoughts. I think the concept of having local groups that are working on water problems is necessary. There are not. This is a different concept. There aren't barriers necessarily to be able to do that, and with the different examples, this is a different format. But I do think that if we're going to have this statutorily defined relationship between the boards and the Division of Water Resources, where we're constrained by what water law allows us to do, that there's just some of these are some of the unanswered questions or considerations that need to be addressed.
Thank you so much for bringing those up. And that's one reason why I want you to come up, is to bring up those very specific items, because I don't think you could have done that in 2 minutes. So really appreciate you. Although you could have, you never know. Would you be open to any questions if there are any, and it's up to you if you wish to take them or not. Because there are some very specific things that were brought up that might bring up some
Yes,
questions.
I
from-
would be
from
happy
some of the
to,
members.
Adam Sullivan, for the record, I think that would be great to have that dialogue, and I appreciate the opportunity to go over the 2-minute limit.
Great, thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Are there any questions from the committee members? Assemblymember Hanson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here. Along the lines that when we were talking about maybe the undue burden for your division to have to handle, in a timely manner, these local groundwater boards, I think Mr. Fontaine mentioned maybe a cap. So if that were to be something that were implemented in the language or was a concern, is that something that might make you feel more comfortable? And with that question, I was looking in section 110A. The groundwater boards must be dissolved 4 years after the date of the board is established, if I'm understanding right. So it's not like we would just continue to grow a bunch of these, that some will fade away. And if we, even entertain the idea of a cap, I think we we kind of solve some of the concern that this might grow to be too big for your office to kind of handle?
Adam Sullivan, for the record, thank you for that question. Yeah, I think that's viable because in my eyes immediately, that helps define what that workload would be to help us be prepared for that. The question would be how to prioritize which basins would be within that cap. I don't have an answer for that, but if there were, I think that would have to be thought through so it's not an arbitrary limit that provides an allowance for some people but not for others. But as far as workload on our office, yes, having defined numbers like that is definitely helpful.
Assemblymember DeLong.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Sullivan, thank you very much for coming up and talking. I think it's quite helpful in flushing out the issues associated with this bill. And it was great that, you mentioned what your options are, which are pretty limited in the over appropriated and or over pumped basins, which is curtailment or critical management areas. Those are really the only two things. I was wondering do you view the potential establishment of a groundwater management board in a basin that is facing those conditions as a potential initial step to have the locals try and come up with some ideas prior to you having to say, we have to designate this as a critical management area because that's the only option before curtailment?
Thank you for that question. Adam Sullivan, for the record. Yeah, that's something that we've thought through. And anytime where the data is indicating that groundwater levels are going down, we have a chronic problem, and we're recognizing that we have very limited options. The absolute first step is to communicate with the people who are directly affected by any sort of administrative action that would affect them. There are, I would say there's examples different kinds of examples around the state that are in that situation where there is some form of public organization around coming up with alternatives. Groundwater boards would be another way to get there. But that's actually a question in my mind. Why can't we already do that now with the existing options? Why can't a county just establish an organization like that as compared to having this procedure? I don't have necessarily a good answer for that, but I feel that's my opinion that we can already do that. And it's really important to do.
And thank you for so much for being able to come on the spot like that. So thank you so much for those questions. Are there any other questions? Great, thank you so much. So at this time, we will open it up for testimony in support of AB 363. As a reminder, please remember to clearly state and spell your name for the record, testify in support if you support the bill in its entirety, testify in opposition if you oppose anything, even if it's just one word in the bill. Testify neutral if you're not taking a position, just providing us with information. Please limit testimony to 2 minutes. We ask you avoid repeating testimony made by previous speakers. Please feel free to say ditto. Please keep your comments to the substance of the bill, and call-in information can be found on the agenda. We may begin here in Carson City in support of AB 363.
Good afternoon. My name is Vincent Guthrow. Last name is spelled Guthrreau. I am the Executive Director of the Nevada Association of Counties, or NACO, or a statewide organization that represents all 17 of Nevada's counties. We're here to support this legislation. We think this enables a community-level discussion on these critical matters, and we think that really it could create a partnership and, you know, the most arid state in the country around these important issues. So for that and some of the enabling language around a community-level discussion, NACO is in support. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Caleb Cage. Last name is spelled C-A-G-E. I'm here on behalf of Eureka County. Eureka County supports this bill as it was articulated by Mr. Fontaine. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Seeing nobody else here in Carson City. Anybody in Las Vegas? Elko looks dark. AVH, is there anybody on the phones?
Chair, the public lines are open and working, but we have no callers to testify in support at this time.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear opposition, testimony in opposition of the bill. Is there anybody here in Carson City?
Thank you, Chair Anderson, members of the committee, Andy Belanger, with the Southern Nevada Water Authority, here today in opposition to the bill, but not in opposition to the concept of groundwater boards. We have worked on this bill for the last 3 or 4 sessions, and we want to make sure that groundwater boards eventually get addressed in the statute. I'm surprised we didn't hear this a little bit in the opener, but we talked about this a lot during the interim as part of that broad stakeholder group to try to figure out a way to get this done without the fiscal impacts that a bill like you're seeing in front of you has. And what our concept included was to get the state out of the process of establishing the groundwater boards and keeping that at the county level. Let the county establish the board, frankly, authorize the county to impose a fee on groundwater users in the basin so that they have resources to solve problems and allow for real solutions to happen that are tailor-made to the communities that have the problems. That solution gets the state engineer out of this sort of, do we support, are we the regulator, are we the advisor, sort of issue that we're dealing with in AB 363, and keeps that line of understanding very, very clear. We got close on that group. The issue with the coalition was that there were a few members who wanted to make sure that the state engineer had a role. So we had a line in there that said that the state engineer at his discretion could provide insights to the groundwater boards, but that wasn't agreed to by the whole group. So I just wanted to put that on the record. That is incidentally patterned after the Las Vegas Valley Groundwater Management Program that the legislature established in 1997, which has been a model of solving Las Vegas's groundwater issues by Las Vegans with Las Vegas dollars. And I really think that if we want to solve this long term, we have to let the counties establish these boards and give them a funding source so that they can figure out solutions to their own problems. And with that, I will conclude.
Good afternoon, Chair Anderson, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Nick Schneider, Director of Government Affairs for the Vegas Chamber. Just wanted to quickly echo the comments made by my colleague, Mr. Bellinger, and just add that we do have some concerns regarding the composition of the groundwater boards and would ask for some consideration of including a water policy expert to ensure that the water policy recommendations that are considered or to be implemented are based on science and expertise. Thank you so much.
Seeing no one else come to the table in Carson City, Las Vegas, Elko, AVH. If you'd like to testify in opposition, please call in. Is there anybody on the line?
Chair, we have no callers to testify in opposition at this time.
Thank you. We'll now move into testifying in neutral. I know we've already heard from the department, but is there anyone wishing to testify in neutral?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Kyle Roerink, Executive Director of the Great Basin Water Network. And, we think this is a really important discussion that I've been a part of since 2021. And, we keep coming back and kind of rehashing some of the same arguments. But I think what we've heard from all parties is, expressing a desire that we need to do more. This has only been done 3 times under the current statutory framework. And I think an important question to ask is, if we do believe that we have a groundwater issue, what can we be doing to compel more collaboration amongst groundwater users out in basins and out in the field and pumping every day? So I think this concept is one that can be a tool for the future, and we need to figure something out rather than, we'll be here in 2027 saying, hey, how about groundwater boards? So let's keep the conversation going. And I think, again, one of the reasons that compelled me to come up was the Section 9. I think there's some really important language in there that needs to be considered. I think if you are to have something like this get into place, there aren't going to be people suing the state engineer over a decision that they make. And, these are some of the changes that we've made since 2021 and per diems and things like that. So anyways, we appreciate your time and thank you so much.
So without objection, that feels a little bit more like support to me. Would you, I think I'm gonna move it over. Good deal. I'm gonna move it on over to support. Thank you so much. Is there anybody who'd like to testify in neutral here in Carson, seeing nobody else coming to the mic? Vegas, Elko, AVH.
Chair, we have no callers to testify in neutral.
Thank you. That concludes testimony on the bill. Would you like to make any closing remarks, Mr. Fontaine?
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate everyone coming to the table and testifying. I appreciate the questions, and I think it has been a good discussion. I think the most important point that I want to make is that there's really an interest, and I believe a strong need to have that formalized relationship between the locals who are the most impacted by decisions of the state engineer and the Division of Water Resources, if nothing else, to make sure that whatever they might decide to do, or the state engineer and division might decide to do, is coordinated at the very least. And so regardless of whether the board is appointed by the Board of County Commissioners or the Division of Water Resources or anybody else, I think it's important to have that formalized relationship. And the other thing is, it's not about other groups. And I'm not exactly sure what State Engineer Sullivan was referring to. I have participated in a couple of working groups on some issues with the department, but this is a group of the folks that are most impacted and have probably the biggest stake of anybody in the health and condition of these groundwater basins. And so in order to get folks involved and put in the time and effort to do this, I think they need to be recognized. And I think it needs, again, to have that connection and relationship with the Division of Water Resources. So thank you.
Thank you, and I know that we've got a few members also that still has some more questions for you. Would you be open to having those meetings with us individually if possible? Thank you, sir, and thank you for presenting that today. So that, I will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 363, and we will now move into what we had started off with, actually, which would be the work session. Before doing so, I just want to clarify about the bills that were introduced earlier, that those was to introduce them on the floor rather than to accept or to adopt. I was in a rush, so I wanted to make sure that that's clear, that that was only to introduce them. All right. So let's get started with our work session. As a reminder, it is not customary for the committee to take testimony or rehear a bill during a work session. However, I may invite the bill sponsor or a witness to come forward to make clarifications on the bill or to answer questions during our consideration of a measure. We will begin with Assembly Bill 29. Ms. Parrott, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you, Chair. Becky Peratt, Legislative Council Bureau, for the record. As a reminder, as nonpartisan committee staff, I can neither advocate for nor oppose any of the legislation that comes before this committee. Assembly Bill 29 makes various changes related to motor vehicle fuel advertising mediums and labeling. This bill is sponsored by the Assembly Committee on Natural Resources on behalf of the Department of Agriculture. Dr. Strajewski, Administrator of Measurement Standards for the department, presented on the bill. It was heard on February 10th. There are no amendments, and the division is here if there are any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay. Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to do pass Assembly Bill 29.
So moved.
Second.
Great. A motion made by Vice Chair LaRue Hatch, second by Watts. All those in favor, is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Wonderful, the motion has passed unanimously. Is there anyone interested in doing the floor statement? Seeing none, I will assign it to, sorry. Never mind. Assemblymember Hanson, if you would please do that for us. Thank you so much. All right, let's move on to the next. Let's move on to Assembly Bill 86. If you would please go ahead.
Assembly Bill 86 is sponsored by the Assembly Committee on Natural Resources on behalf of the Legislative Committee for the Review and Oversight of the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency and the Marlette Lake Water System. Assemblymember Gray and the State Forester Fire Warden presented on this bill. It was heard on February 12th. The bill removes cutting operations from the requirement in NRS 528.042 to secure a logging permit from the State Forester Fire Warden. After the hearing, the Division of Forestry submitted an amendment to replace the amendment discussed during the hearing. This amendment proposes to remove all references to cutting operations in Chapter 528 of NRS. The division is here today if there are any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Just to make sure, excuse me, sorry about that. Members, are there any questions on AB 86? Okay, I will entertain a motion to amend and do pass AB 86. In a second, thank you so much. Motion made by Assemblymember DeLong, second by Assemblymember Watts. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Wonderful, the motion is passed unanimously. And I will ask Assemblymember Gray to do the floor statement if possible. Well, thank you so much for a very productive meeting today. That concludes our meeting. Oh, excuse me, I almost forgot about one thing. We'll begin with public comment. For those in the physical locations, if you'd like to make any public comment, come on up to the table here in Carson. Seeing none. Anybody in Las Vegas? Elko? AVH?
Chair, we have no callers on the line to provide public comment.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes our meeting for today. Our next meeting will be on Monday, March 24th at 4 p.m.